Nightmare boat service stories run a plentiful. Until I met Bow and Stern Marine and Alex Lopez, who I'm on the way to meet right now to service our boat and to tell you more about their service, which is reliable, which is communicative, which gets the job done. So for those of you that have struggled with a good boat service company, or you've had a nightmare story, or man, your boat's been off the water for far too long, we're gonna talk to Alex today with Bow and Stern Marine, and you're gonna have a new option for your boat service company the next time you need to get your boat service. Let's go talk to him. All right, Alex, so we are on our way. We just met at his shop in Osage Beach. And so the service that you offer, Alex, is that, so for me, I don't have anybody down here. I'm down here by myself. So I thought to myself, how the hell am I gonna get you my boat, get my car, get back to my place? And so I met you at your shop. We're driving, you're taking me back to my condo to get the boat. We're gonna meet at a ramp. We're gonna bring it back to the shop, which then I have my car there. So is this something that you commonly do with your customers?
Majority of the time we go through and we actually take care of majority of the transportation. So whenever it comes to a client that may be from St. Louis or from Kansas City and doesn't normally live here on a full-time basis, we'll go through and we'll take care of getting their boat pulled for them, getting the service completed, and getting it back to their dock without them ever needing to lift a finger. But we're very flexible and we can make pretty much whatever method of transportation work, so that way it all works very smoothly for the client.
It's awesome, because this is super convenient for me. It makes it easier on me, and you know what, honestly, it's kind of cool to get to hang out with the guy who's going to be like working on my baby. So
oh, definitely, yeah, we look forward to completing whatever services and stuff that you're going to be looking for.
Let's just make sure there's nothing major wrong with it, okay? Can we do that?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be anything too crazy. It's a routine service, and we're definitely very experienced with those. So anything and everything, maintenance items, we're more than happy to take care of for you.
Fingers crossed. All right, so we are on our way back to the shop with the boat. It's pretty painless.
Oh yeah.
Now, you and I first met on my dock. You came out to do a service call on our Sea-Doo, actually. And you mentioned you don't typically work on jet skis that much, and in our case you weren't super comfortable knowing exactly what was wrong, so you recommended us to another company.
Yes, sir.
Which we appreciated. And while you were there, it was just good timing, we had you come down to our boat and you got your computer out and some kind of a service check, right?
So what we did was just a kind of a checkup of the boat. We hooked our computer up to it and went through and checked to make sure that all of your vitals, is basically what you could call it, were in the proper ranges. And what we noticed was that the temperature was actually a little warmer than what it should be, and you could also see a lot of water vapor coming from the exhaust. So that was telling us we had a maintenance issue that we needed to look in getting completed.
So is that something that you do regularly for people's boats, is come out and kind of do a diagnostic check?
We do quite a bit. There will be several clients of ours that they want us to come out and they have some kind of service in mind already that they want us to complete, but while we're there they usually ask us to go through and make sure that there's nothing else they're missing. I mean, it's one thing, you know, to have a boat that you keep track of all the services, but it's another thing to have someone who also knows what services your boat requires to help kind of fill in the blanks and make sure that everything is kept up to date.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, I've actually never seen that done before. Is that something pretty common down here at the lake?
It's very common, yeah, and it's something that majority of the technicians down here you're gonna want to make sure that they have the capability to check your engine through, not only to check and see if there's anything your engine needs to make sure it's running good, but to also double check their work once they complete it.
Well, we're gonna head back to the shop now, and we're gonna do a full-blown interview and learn more about Bow and Stern.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we are back at the shop here with Alex with Bow and Stern Marine.
Yes, sir.
And as you can see here, we've got some activity in the background. We're sitting on my boat that you are going to be servicing. So Alex, first of all, about a little introduction. Like this business, how long have you been in business servicing boats?
We're going on our third year now, so we've been servicing boats since I believe it was February of 22. So like I said, we're working on our third year, so about 2.5 years so far. And it's actually me and I'm partnering with Scott Miller. He's a teacher from the Lake Career and Technical Center. He teaches the high school course, so they go through and he'll teach all the students from what the basics of what makes up an engine, how an engine works, to tools, safety, and then he goes, as he progresses through the year, it'll go through small engines, jet skis, then your outboards, your stern drives, and then finally it progresses on actually going in and doing work-based learning. So he sends his students off to different marinas and different companies here that do service repair on boats. And they all basically get to experience what it's like to actually have a job, but it's through an internship position through the school.
Nice. And which brings me back to digressing. You are born and raised here.
Yes, sir.
From Camdenton, went to Camdenton, went to the tech school, right? You're literally born and raised in this area.
Yes, yeah. I've lived here all my life. I mean, the lake, I take the lake very dearly to me. It is what makes not only economy here, but so many families come here to enjoy just some time together and family, friends, and all of the different things to do here at the lake during the summer. It's just a very unique place and something that I look to try to make sure that when people do come down to enjoy it, they can make the most of it, especially using their boat and using everything that obviously they make it a pretty substantial investment towards.
Yeah, I mean, our boats are our babies. My wife teases me and says, why aren't you as meticulous about cleaning anything else as much as you are your boat? And any boat owner can probably resonate with that, can understand that. And so, as I mentioned in the intro to this video, the nightmare stories that you hear about servicing boats, or somebody going AWOL, or a boat sitting in a service shop for weeks, maybe months at a time, or it's a boat, right? It's the acronym for break out another 1,000. So your business is so critically important to us big babies who treat these things like our babies. And as I mentioned, like the reliability, the communication, that is so incredibly important. And you and I just met not that long ago, and I had a previous service company that went AWOL on us. I will leave them unnamed, and here we are. And not only, as I have mentioned, did you come down to my dock and did the diagnostic and came and met me to pull the boat off the water. You're a relatively new company, but you're a growing company, and you're a company that wants to take on more business. And so, what would you say potentially differentiates you from maybe some of the other competition on the lake?
I mean, the big thing that we aim to do, like you were mentioning, is the communication. That we want to make sure that, like you're saying, you pay a lot of money and take a lot of time and effort to make sure the boat is perfect, is meticulous. I mean, it's a big investment, but like I said, what makes us a little different is that we go through and make sure that if you have a question towards your boat, or if something is just confusing to maybe the operation, or maybe having a comfortable riding experience on the boat, we make sure that we not only can communicate what we're doing to your boat, but make sure that we can communicate answers that are going to provide results and something that'll make you more comfortable and make the whole boating experience a lot more reliable.
Yeah. So your background, as you mentioned, is you're from the lake. You went to the local lake school. So what is your background? What led you to do this? Like, what is the education required that put you in this industry?
So there's actually quite a bit of different education, and I've taken at least 4 years, actually 5 years of education, and I went through the whole high school technical program to make sure that I can understand not only how to properly work on an engine, but to just experience different kinds of engines that are out there. I also went to, which is also at the Career Center, I went to the adult technical school, and that right there gets you more into the world of diagnostics and more in-depth troubleshooting, and that way you can not only do what you had trained while you were in high school, but you can also apply some of the newer technology and the service programs and all that are available to you, and be able to confidently make repairs, whether you're going to work for a major company or whether you do like I did and partner up with somebody and basically start something from scratch.
Yeah. And you mentioned even, which I thought was kind of cool, that you have competed in competitions, which I didn't even know something like that existed. So tell us a little bit about that.
So the competition I competed in, it's called Skills USA, and it's basically a competition for the trades. So there's all kinds of different trades that compete in it, whether it be HVAC, marine service, power sports, I mean everything. Even electricians are competing in it and everything, and it's for like a school hosted event. And basically what you do is go through and express your knowledge and your understanding of your trade and express your skills to show, I guess, the competitors and the other judges there that you understand what you're doing, and being able to come home with scholarships and tools that help in the trade. And it's just, like I said, it's not only something that teaches you how to work on some different things that you may have never seen before, but it also gives you that competition mindset to give not only quality towards your work, but also to, I guess you could say, have that work ethic towards accomplishing something to succeed.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like a master's degree.
Definitely.
You know, it's and again, working on something of this magnitude, of this importance to people, that's important. Okay, so what types of boats do you work on? Do you work on any type of boat, any type of engine? Tell us like what someone can expect there.
So the big thing that I like to work on is I like to work on stern drives, inboards, outboards, and that's pretty much where I have my experience in. That's what I went to school for, and that is what I work on and I see majority of on a day-to-day basis. I also have the computer programs to be able to look into those systems and make sure that we fully diagnose them and that we don't miss anything. That's a big thing whenever you're working on these boats. I mean, it's one thing to work at these engines blindly, and then it's another to be able to see what the actual problem code is, because a lot of clients don't really bring their boat in just because they think it's broken. It's making a noise, it's got a light, it's doing something weird, you know, and that right there is usually the engine's way in the boat world of telling you there's a problem and that it needs some attention before anything else goes wrong.
Yeah. And you mentioned that some of the boat servicers down here at the lake only work on boats that they sell, for example, or they only work on a specific brand, right, of engine, and that's not the case with you.
No, so for us, I mean, we work on a wide variety of boats. You know, we'll take in as much as we can that we are comfortable repairing. You know, if there's something we are look at and we're just not comfortable making that repair, you know, we're gonna let our client know before we proceed with anything. Before there's any work done, any wrenches turned, anything like that, we're gonna let them know it's okay. This is something that is a little out of our realm of being able to successfully repair with what we have tool-wise and material-wise for our servicing, and we'll let them know that. But as far as things go, you know, we'll go through Service Cruiser, Yamaha, Volvo Pensa, and there's just plenty of others out there, Suzuki and Hondas. We'll service a few Hondas and just go through and make sure that those repairs are completed successfully from beginning to end.
Nice, nice. What is there a certain size boat that you kind of max out at?
So we are currently limited by the availability of a trailer. So if it's a boat that needs to come out for some kind of outdrive service or something like that, we are limited to about 32 feet.
Okay.
And then of course whatever is legal to take on the road. But as far as sizes of boats that we can do repair-wise when it comes to inboard application, we can work on pretty much whatever size. We also offer servicing for a multitude of systems when it comes to winterization and summerization, so whether that be your air conditioners, your generators, ice makers, sinks, bathrooms, all kinds of stuff on the boats. All the systems we are able to successfully and efficiently put those into winterization before any freezing or anything like that comes.
Nice, nice. And you work on, you can, you know, we're in your shop to take the boat off the water, but you can work on boats while they're in their docks, right? On the
Definitely, yeah. So that's something we find that's a little unique for what we do. A lot of marinas will look to take and pull the boat into their shop just for efficiency reasons, and I mean, it makes sense, but a lot of the times a boat really doesn't always have to leave the slip to to experience a successful repair. So
Is that a convenience to the boat repair company more so obviously to the client? Because as a client, I would prefer to work on it on my dock if possible. Like I would rather not take it off the water, you know?
a lot of the times it just depends on what the repair consists of. Majority of the time what we see is if it's a simple repair that can be accomplished while it's on the client's lift or at the client's property or wherever that boat may be, other than our shop, a lot of the times that'll save the client quite a bit in transportation fees and trailer rental fees and all of that, just to be able to go out and either give them a preliminary idea of what the next steps may be, or a lot of the times it may be something simple enough we can either make a repair there at the dock or give them enough of a repair that they're going to be able to take the next necessary steps to be able to not necessarily spend so much, say, in a tow of the boat. You know, we may be able to get the boat in operational condition where it can power itself on or off of a trailer. And a lot of companies won't go that extra route just because it's something that they need to bring into their shop to, in their mindset, efficiently make a repair, which is understandable. But like I said, that's what makes us a little different. Is we actually will go out and do some of those extra steps just to help save a little bit in the end for our client.
I love that. I love that. Now, one of the probably the biggest frustrations when you're getting your boat repaired or you're calling to get your boat repaired is how far out oftentimes a boat repair company is. And you had mentioned that based on your capacity, I mean, you guys are kind of flowing right now, right? So what would you say is, what is your turn time right now? Or if somebody calls off this video and says, yeah, actually, I need something to get checked out, what is a typical expectation about when you could get them in?
So usually a typical expectation is we try to do our troubleshooting within a week's time of the phone call. So whatever it may take, we're going to do our best to get out there and try to get you some kind of answer to move forward. We don't want to leave you hanging of, oh yeah, it may take us 2-3 weeks, a month to get out there and give you an idea of what's going on, because yes, we may not be able to get to that specific project right now, but someone else may be able to. And then as of right now, we're only looking to be about a week and a half out with our current flow of work. So I'm assuming it's going to pick up just a little bit more as the 4th of July season comes over, as it did with Memorial Day weekend and everything. But right now we're flowing pretty good through our work, and projects are efficiently turning and they're staying repaired.
That's awesome. What is something that somebody could plan correctly for? So when you talk about winterization, or you mentioned the word summerization, which I've never heard that word before, obviously getting it ready for summer. What is, if somebody's watching this and they're thinking to themselves, man, I'm always scrambling, what is kind of what would you recommend somebody do for winterization, like what time of the year, and then what would you recommend for summerization?
So the big thing I tell people for winterization is try to give whoever you're calling at least 2 weeks of notice before you plan to use the boat for the very last time. And there actually is a few steps that most people can take before they stop using the boat, whether it be putting fuel stabilizer in or shutting a few systems off that they may not need to finish the year out. There's a few steps that might be able to help make a more efficient winterization. And a lot of the times during that process and that conversation 2 weeks prior to the winterization, we can actually figure out when that client's going to be most comfortable to finish the year with their boat. And then same with summerization. We aim to try to get people in about 2 weeks, or at least start taking in calls about 2 weeks prior to when they plan to first use the boat. So there's actually still clients of ours that haven't de-winterized their boat yet, just because they don't plan to be here till August. They don't plan to be here till Labor Day. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a lot better in their favor to wait to de-winterize that boat until they're ready to use it. So that way it makes sure things like your batteries are up, make sure that all of the fluids are where they're supposed to be, especially on some of the older boats, and just all in all make sure it's ready pretty close to prior when you're coming to use the boat.
All right, last question. What is the one piece of advice that you would say you would give to a boat owner to properly maintain and take care of their boat?
I think the one biggest and probably best piece of information that I can tell any boat owner to take care of their boat is use it. A lot of the times the biggest issue that we come across in boats is that they don't get used. So I mean, that plays out in pretty much everybody's favor. So the more you use the boat, the more apt it is to stay up to date with service, up to date with all of the fluids that are in it, and just in general, a much happier boating experience. So definitely.
So like the motor's happier.
Well, the motor stays used, so it stays in operating condition. All the components, a lot of the maintenanceable components in your drive are plastic or they're rubber, and a lot of the times when they just sit, they tend to dry out. So it's definitely a good idea just to use the boat.
Yeah, run the motor.
Run the motor, use the boat, and definitely if there's anything when it comes to noises or anything like that with the engine, definitely
Don't mess around.
don't mess around. Get it serviced immediately or get it into someone who can take a look at it and give you a very professional opinion on what it's going to take or the next steps it's going to take to get that repair complete.
Well, all of my friends are going to be happy to hear you say that because they have no problem running their boats. So that's the best advice you could give. And the one thing I will say is that, to your last point, when, I've had an issue, I've never felt confident in a boat repair company. And so just my advice to anybody watching this is you should give Alex and his team a call because give him a text, whatever, because he responds. And at the very least, you are going to give your best diagnosis that you can or give your advice to say, yeah, that sounds a little off. I should probably come check it out. Or you might say, that's normal. Don't worry about it. Keep running. But make that call. And it's nice to know that you have somebody to make that call to, and we will share his contact information at the end of the video. But before we finish, I want you to maybe show us what you got going on in the shop. Maybe give us a couple of examples of what you're working on. Let's get some close-ups.
Yeah, let's take a look.
All right, let's start with my boat, my engine, right? So I told you that I was due for an oil change. Last time I had the oil change was during COVID. And so I just know I'm due. And so you said, yes, you did the diagnostic. We talked about that already. What are you probably going to be checking out with my motor that might need servicing?
So the big thing we want to check out is the gear oil, the oil that's in the lower unit. We want to make sure that it's going to be in a suitable condition, that it hasn't retained any water, hasn't had any bad seals, and just make sure that it's had a proper wear life, and then we'll go through and replace it. We'll replace the oil, check behind the prop, make sure that there isn't any fishing line tangled up back there, which could let water into the lower unit. And then we'll also go through, and while we have this lower unit removed from the boat, we're going to replace the water pump and make sure that the original issue we brought the boat in for is going to get resolved, to make sure that the engine itself is not going to be running abnormally warm. The other thing we'll look at while we're here is make sure that the engine's oil has been replaced, all the filters, including the fuel filters, have been serviced or replaced, and then just do an overall maintenanceable look over the engine. So checking things like if there's belts on board this engine for accessories such as your alternator, making sure those aren't cracked or frayed, and going through and doing a generic check on hoses, making sure all the clamps are secure, there's no leaking fuel, and there's just overall nothing to worry about. In other words, we'd like to make sure when the boat leaves our shop, it is turnkey ready.
So when I have the girls on the boat this weekend, we're gonna have no issues, other than a bunch of crazy women. I'll say no more. And you had mentioned the one thing that I thought was fascinating, and this may be normal, and I might just be ignorant, which is very possible. But you mentioned the fishing line. So explain what could happen, and actually maybe you could show us on the motor that you've got in here that you said the fishing line got caught up in the motor. Is it this guy right here?
Yeah. So this lower unit here is off of a 2004 Honda 130. That's 130 horsepower, and basically what happens is you can't really see the fishing line in the water. I mean, obviously it's really tiny, really thin.
Where would it get caught up?
Transparent, and it'll actually get caught up and wrapped right down behind your propeller right here, and it'll get wrapped up right around that front seal that's on there. And that seal's main responsibility is to keep the water out of your lower unit. And once that seal gets all compromised with fishing line and it just gets extremely hot, when that all gets tight in there, it will burn up and let water in. And when that water goes through the winter time, the drive will freeze and crack, and things like pushed out plastics or pushed out bearing carriers, those will all cause significant issues once you come back in the springtime to enjoy your boat.
It's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's definitely a big part of the winterization procedure. So whenever the boat gets pulled in the wintertime to do an overall last minute checkup for winterization, that is one of the crucial components, is to look at the gear loop, do a sample of the gear loop, or replace the gear loop, which is what I'd recommend, is to highly replace the gear loop and make sure that there's not going to be any water trapped in that lower unit that may freeze and give you problems and headaches in the springtime.
Awesome. What's something else we got going on in here?
We've got the formula coming in for its 25-hour oil change. So this one here is actually a pretty interesting project for us. So we went through, we pulled out this engine last year, and we sent it off to Eagle Machinery out in Buffalo. They went through, rebuilt the engine, cleaned it all up, basically gave it a new life. And we went through, redressed it with all brand new tune-up components, new spark plugs, wires, made it all nice and fresh again, and reinstalled this into this gentleman's boat, resealed the outdrive, and did bellows and fresh gear lube, fresh oil. Everything is nice and fresh and clean on this boat. And this boat is finally coming in for its 25-hour break-in oil change after all this machining work was done. And to say the least, I mean, it was a really exciting project to see come together, and it was just overall fun to put the project together and make it work.
Rewarding, right?
Oh yeah, very.
And this is just kind of routine stuff at this point.
It can be. So the larger engine pull jobs, we like to schedule them closer to the winter time. If there is something it needs, say, such as a blown coupler, or maybe some kind of issue with a bearing in your outdrive, we'll go through and get that pulled out during the springtime, because nobody wants to be without their boat more than they have to be. But for ones that are more of a major rebuild, or something that's going to be taking it a month of time or more, we want to make sure that we get those done when you're least going to need the boat. So this boat, in this gentleman's case, was already in working order. We just went through in the wintertime and made sure that he was not going to have any problems this year for things like leaking oil, things like burning off oil, and water coming into the boat.
Yeah. Okay, last but not least, what's going on here?
So this here, this gentleman brought this boat into us and had asked us to go through and fix a hydraulic leak that was outside the boat. So he's actually having issues where the steering stabilizers on the outside of the boat, the hoses are extremely dry rotted and they're starting to leak, and the power steering line from the cooler is also leaking on the inside of the boat. So it's making a pretty big mess, especially after he just had a new power steering pump installed, and it's just time to get the boat out and do some maintenance. And as well, once we have the boat out, we're going to go through and change his gear lube line fitting from the inside reservoir on the boat all the way up to the outdrive, since it was leaking too, which could let water in. So it's definitely time to get it replaced. And once we have the boat out, a big thing we like to inspect is the bellows that are within the boat, the bearing that's in the transom, and the drive shaft that's on the outdrive, and make sure that everything is in working order and greased and ready to go back together, along with changing the gear lube in the outdrive to make sure there's just nothing you have to worry about for at least 3 years of the service time for that particular part.
How long has this one been here, and how long will it take to get her out?
This gentleman's boat has been here for roughly about half a week now, so about 3 or 4 days. Yeah, 3 or 4 days right now, and we're going through and getting him a quote built up. So there's a few different things that he's looking at and kind of making decisions with as we're getting this project underway, that he wants to make sure that we fall within the correct budgeting of the boat, and everything is very transparent before we start. So everything from the parts we're going to replace to the labor that it's going to take to replace those parts are all incorporated into a final estimate of what it's going to take to get your final accomplishment or your goal done with the boat. And that's all put up front and first before we touch and do any further repairs. So basically what we're looking at right now is going through and, like I said, getting the drive serviced, changing some hoses, and overall just doing a general drive service inspection on this boat.
Nice. So once you get that quoted and he wants to move forward, how long do you think that'll take you to get this thing put back together?
A big thing that takes us a little while on some of these boats is parts. So it's not necessarily that we can't complete the repairs in a quick time. Some parts that we do go after on these boats may take a week, may take 2 weeks. I mean, some of the parts, unfortunately, can take a little longer than a month to get here, which is not necessarily anything we have control over. But, you know, as soon as the process has started and as soon as we have confirmation that the project is in the correct budgeting range of our clients, that we'll go ahead and get parts moving. We don't want to wait any longer than we have to be able to get a project underway and started, especially if a part is going to take a little longer than normally expected.
All right, Alex, how does somebody get a hold of you if they want to have you take a look at their boat?
So the best way I tell everybody to get a hold of any of us here is definitely give us a call. Our phone number is 573-410-9492. Or you can email me at alex@b2smarine.com. Like I said, either way, anytime you guys give us a call, I'll get back to anybody as soon as I possibly can, because like I said, boating is important to everybody, and it's important to us that your boat works.
Amen, man. Let's get this boat back in the water, brother.
Yes,
I appreciate
sir.
you, man.